A warm welcome back onto the program. It's still the conversation here on Lagos Television. Sometime last week, President Bola Tinubu launched in Nigeria the consumer credit scheme. And since that launch, a lot of people have expressed different opinion whether or not this scheme will work in Nigeria to its optimum, or whether or not it is just another way by which Nigerians, this will just be by the name and not what it intends to do. But what exactly is the consumer credit scheme, and how can Nigerians ensure that this scheme works? Or better still, how can Nigerians access the scheme and make it work? That is what we intend to take a look at on the program today. And if this scheme will also work, what are some of the things that the federal government needs to put in place at ensuring the success of the scheme? And joining the conversation today is a former president of the Nigerian British Commerce Chamber of Commerce, Prince Dapo Adelegan. Thank you for being here on the program.
Thank you always. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So by the the barest meaning of consumer credit is just a way by which consumers can borrow money or incur debts and defer payment of that money over time. And so if you take a look at the system here in Nigeria, without sounding pessimistic, is this something that you think, if done correctly, is able to thrive in Nigeria, especially with the way our economy is at the moment?
Well, thank you very much. I think we need to give kudos to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for initiating this game changer policy, particularly in the current state of our economy. A society without credit scheme is one that is struggling economically. Beyond the issue of being able to buy and pay over a period of time, the credit scheme is also a major stimulation of industrial development.
Okay.
When an organization is set up, a factory, for example, and produces goods, the inability of consumers to procure those goods in a way and the volume that is sustainable may lead to the demise of that industry.
Right.
So when you look at the deluge of legacy industries across Nigeria, a lot of them were well thought out, well built, funded properly, but the output of these industries were not consumed. People could not buy them.
Right.
So what is the purpose of setting up an industry when the people do not have the wherewithal to buy?
Right.
In other economies all over the world, credit schemes helps consumers to buy products. You put 10% down and get a car and pay over 5-10 years. You want to buy furniture of 5 million naira, you put 500,000 and spread over a long time. It is only in this country that you have to put 100% down.
Okay.
So that does not help production. It doesn't help the industrial development of the country. It also does not afford good life for the citizens of the country. So it's a multi-level game changer.
Right.
So beyond affording credit for consumers, at least 50% of our population are in the working group. Civil servants, individuals with good credit history and so on and so forth. Federal civil and state civil servants. Once this is launched, you will see an increase in production. You will see a lot of our industries more stabilized because they can sell their outputs, because people can buy them by just putting a little bit of money and the rest can be paid over some time.
Okay, how do we do it in such a way that beneficiaries will not capitalize on the porosity of our system in terms of data and our addressing system in such a way that they will default at the end of the day? And what does it portend for our economic growth and, of course, the purchasing power of Nigerians?
Well, I've mentioned the last question, the purchasing power of Nigeria will be improved because they can now buy more things, they can have better life because they can afford it by just paying a percentage. And there's a credit scheme that guarantees those who lend, who provide payment for the goods, and then allows it to pay over time, which is good for the economy. In terms of being able to be sustained, look, every credit scheme all over the world, there is always about 5 to 10% possibility of default. That is standard. Even the student loan scheme, you know, as brilliant as it is, there will be room for potentials who will never pay back. But these are social intervention projects, okay, that is not fully about profitability. You know, and a 10% or 15%, you know, default does not make a case for its non-retention because it has a larger and wider impact than the total money returned. Okay. So in terms of, yes, over time, you may have at the beginning some default, but if you look at the terms of the policy, the government is going to work with the central bank, credit registry, the financial institutions, and where it's civil servant, whether federal or state, they will be deducted from source. Where it's an individual, they will have to check the credit history of that individual before money is lent to that individual. So there are already checks and balances to ensure that majority, that is 90-95% of the people that will benefit from this scheme will be in a position to pay back. If 5 to 10% are struggling or defaulting, that is fine. Over time, okay, we'll almost get to 100% compliance status, but it does not stop it from starting.
Right, so from mid-May thereabouts, the Credit Core website will be open, and just like you mentioned here, it will start with civil servants, both at the federal or at the state level, and going forward after then, it will be open to the general public. And you've also mentioned here that government will be working with financial institutions, cooperatives, and a couple of others to ensure the workability of the Credit Core initiative. Now, it will be rolled out in phases. And so it will be, the website is the starting point where a lot of Nigerians can express interest if they want to be part of this. So for you, what are some of those things that you think that those that will make this work must, as a matter of priority, be sure of when Nigerians show interest in this particular scheme? Because, of course, we also have a little bit of trust issues amongst ourselves here when it comes to Nigerians. And so in ensuring that this will only be accessible to those who are in the brackets of the first phase, what are some of the things that those saddled with the responsibility of carrying out this initiative should watch out for?
Well, I sincerely believe that if you go through the terms and conditions, it's clear that with federal and state civil servants, source deduction is going to be the source of repayment, and individuals that are not in that bracket over time will be brought in, but with good credit. The banks are lending every day, you know, and they have a process. That same process will be used and enhanced to confirm your credit scheme and credit rating to be able to determine the conditions in which you are big. But I think we need to focus our mind clearly that even though this is about Nigerians being able to purchase things on credit, this is more about assisting our industrial capacity. Okay. The credit scheme is primarily targeted to assist more production. Okay, when industries can have buyers who can buy huge volumes of their product, that itself engenders sustainability. It leads to more employment. They pay salaries. They pay tax to government. So it may look like this is about credit scheme. That's just one leg of the benefit. The multiply effect is increased industrial capacity, volume sales, which also brings income, which allows them to employ more by expanding their capacity, and then tax inclusion. So I think we should not lose sight of the multiply effect and the industrial impact of the credit scheme. And that's why I say you must give credit to this government for doing this, because beyond the ability of Nigerians to procure things and pay over time, the bigger effect is the fact that we can now have industrial capacity and sustainability.
Okay, you kept saying manufacturing. Do you then share the belief of the Honorable Minister of Budget and National Planning, Atiku Bagudu? I'm going to read out his speech here. He said that we have put 100 billion in the budget to consumer credit. To us, this is important because the manufacturing sector is struggling with two challenges: efficiency of production and finding somebody who can buy from them. So the introduction and support of consumer credit, we believe, will revive the manufacturing sector.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You know, that shows you that the ultimate intention is to stimulate productivity, consumption of the product, and that leads to increased capacity for this. And when there's increased capacity, what happens? They employ more people. With more employment, we can solve the problem of the social insecurity in the country. And so there's a lot more behind what they use.
The ripple effect.
Ripple effect. The Yoruba say, what is after number 6 is more than 7. So this is a very brilliant, and I must give kudos to a particular older friend of mine, Otumba Reme Abdul, who was the first person that brought this up in about 10, 15 years ago, talking about credit scheme. And we're wondering who is going to get it done. But thank God the game changer is on set. Because this is about exposure. Governance must be about exposure, about looking at the things. I mean, the student loan, for example, student loan is a right, it's not a privilege. In other climes, this has been done.
That's what keeps them going.
That is the strategy for inclusion. When people know that whatever their status in life, they can get education, that's really, I mean, that is the game changer. So these two policies are very critical. And this particular one, like I said, beyond our capacity to consume more, and pay later, it is to help with industrial stimulation and sustainability, and that is the beginning of a new Nigeria.
Wow. Right. According to Credit Corps, the drivers of this initiative, one of the things they're also looking at is promoting responsible consumer credit as a pathway to an improved quality of life, fostering a cultural shift towards growth and financial responsibility. I'd like for us to pick, the lower part of that, fostering a cultural shift. Now, how do we begin to change the mindset of Nigerians, especially now that's making them really understand what this is all about in terms of what we believe in? Oftentimes we believe, I cannot borrow to maybe build a house or buy a car. And you start thinking, in the process, what if I lose my job? Especially now, let's leave civil servants because that one, there's job security. But for the broader perspective, broader people now, what happens when things like that happen, the unforeseen, and then we're talking about changing the cultural mindset of people. How do we begin to make people realize that this is one of the ways by which the economy can be built for a better financial gain? Well,
I think the drafters of this policy would also have taken into consideration the need for mass public enlightenment. And I think over time, when the program rolls off, there will be more information, more public awareness about the benefits and the way this has. But overall, this has also some personal effects on Nigerians. Number one, cashless society. The idea of having to look for 100%. You can extend you can even extend this to rent. I mean, Lagos State is leading in pushing, for example, for a potential monthly rent. Other parts of the world, you pay rents per month. You can leave another 1 month as deposit, but you don't have to find 2 years' rent. So we are being globalized in terms of the reforms that this government is bringing, and to affect a lot of things. Corruption itself, will be affected by this, because the idea of having to have a lot of cash with you, in other parts of the world, if you go to supermarkets in England, for example, and you want to pay with your card, they will tell you whether you want a loan. You don't have to pay. You want to stagger it. So that's a society where even to access anything in that society, look at your credit history. So this will allow us all to have a credit history, to understand the need not to have to pay 100% to derive benefits, and and like I said, the discipline it brings to society. Now the civil servants are just about 10% of the class. So there are a lot of people that are not in the civil service, entrepreneurs in the private sector, more even in the private sector, who have good job security, who work for institutions that are solid enough to guarantee their regular salary without any problem. So this will be a net that will expand, in the shortest possible time, and would then be adopted all over the country.
Okay, according to Mr. President, while was launching the scheme, he did say that the scheme is a pathway to financial inclusion, reducing poverty, and of course addressing insecurity. That insecurity aspect is what I want you to dwell on. What's the link between the consumer credit scheme and addressing the problem of insecurity?
Fantastic. You know, I did say that I think the primary objective, or one of the secondary objectives, if the primary is about credit, the secondary is about industrial stimulation and development. When a society has progressive industrial production, like I said, and expansion, jobs are created. When jobs are created, the proclivity for armed robbery, for kidnapping, and the current level of insecurity will be diminished. Because if you find that a lot of our people are leaving universities without jobs. So when a person lives there for 5 years and at home doing nothing, is amenable to criminal tendencies. So when the president talks about security, it is meaning that ultimately this credit scheme will lead to bigger industrial capacity, bigger production, consumption, and employability and employment for our teeming population of youths. And when there's employment, that is the first challenge to any level of insecurity, because once people can earn, you know, and I mean, nobody wants to be a thief. In truth, it's their back on the wall. They have no choice, you know. But if there's a way through in which jobs can be provided, even not jobs, an industry like I did mention the last time of this program. Every industry has about 50 to 100 vendors supplying all kinds of services. So beyond the people they're employing, they're also giving SME opportunities to grow. So it's overall an economic development strategy that's also giving credit to consumers.
All right, so you've talked about the fact that this will definitely be a backbone for the industries, especially the purchasing power also of Nigerians will increase, since here they will be accessing a loan. Can we also, because part of what this can also be used for is to fund education, and we've also talked about the student loan. Is there a way we can know the difference between this particular initiative and the students' loan, since they're both on the loan basis?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the similarities. They are both game changers. They are both, you know, deliberate government policy to stimulate economic development and social cohesion.
Right.
The student loan, for example, like I said, it is the only way of bringing inclusion. Because the challenge with the society is where a few people are not able to be given the opportunity to attain their God-given capacity because they don't have the right kind of parenthood or the kind of resources that's required. So the student loan affords every strata of society to access good education. And then secondly, it brings discipline to them while they're in school. When a child knows that he's been in school and he has to leave school, get very good grades, to be able to pay back, then probably the challenge we have in our institutions, the restlessness, you know, of our youth will then be reduced. So you find focused education. The challenges even in the universities, you know, where you have a lot of boys going into antisocial activities and the women having to compromise their integrity because they can't afford their school fees, will be eroded. You know, so at the end of the day, you find disciplined and focused students who know that they have a responsibility after school to get a good job and
then pay back.
Then even the parents. A lot of parents spend their entire lifetime struggling to pay school fees for their children. So parents can now use their income, either their pension or their salaries, to take care of themselves, and also plan for their own old age. You know, so you can see that many levels of impact. So just one policy of student loan has impact on the discipline in the university, the focus of the students, and their, you know, responsibility after school, because they have to work to pay. And if they don't get good grades, they can't get jobs. Then the parents, freed of the stress of having to carry these children's responsibility all through their lifetime without no savings. Okay, so you can see that there is a lot of social re-engineering strategy embedded in the student loan. The same thing with this. This is about credit scheme, access to credit, but the main impact is the industrial impact, the ability to create more jobs, because Factories will have to expand. There's a lot of demand for their product because people, rather than come with 100%, can now access those products at 10%. You know, and then the totality of these two is that you find a society that is now much more focused, more active, industrialized, productivity. And we'll have hiccups and challenges along the way.
Most definitely.
You know, but we have started well. And with these two policies, I can see the crisis in the country in terms of insecurity, youth restiveness diminished, you know, and more employment.
Okay, we have seen Mr. President travel the globe looking for investors here and there. And even over the weekend, he was in Holland and Saudi Arabia. This consumer credit scheme now, what signal do you think some of the economic interventions of Mr. President is sending to will-be investors from outside the country?
I mean, like I said, money is very, very focused on where it can get its returns, where the security, where the laws that govern ownership and all the rest of it is clear. I think the message this is going to send to the world is that we have a government that is ready for business. Nigeria was not ready for business for many years. We were claiming we had a lot of money, and we do, but this is business. And government business, I must say, is the biggest business in the world. Don't let anybody, it's bigger than oil and gas and financial institution because of the quantum of taxable fund that's available to government. So this will send the signal that, number one, we're solving our unemployment problem and youth challenges. Nigeria must solve its youth challenges to thrive. You know, so once, like I said, there is something that helps to stimulate more production, more employability and employment. That is solving the security problem, at least substantially. Okay? By also affording education to everyone that deserves it, we're creating a more educated population. Investment does not come into society where there are no capacity. So money goes to where there's capacity. India, for example, is taking in billions of dollars of money every year in terms of foreign investment because it has a tech industry that is very solid. If you get a credit card from any of our banks, most likely the international banks, and you want to access that card to open it to work, you probably call a number. It is likely that in Bangalore or New Delhi, somebody's going to pick up that call. The back end is provided by India. You know, so, and recently you can see that there's an effort of a particular state of Gombe setting up the same kind of system where they can provide back-end support for international organizations from Nigeria. So because we have a business-focused minded government at this stage, the world will be ready to do business with us.
Right.
When people talk about Dubai and the rest of it, it is simply because the Emir and his cabinet are business people. Decisions are taken promptly. You know, we don't drag. You know, we allow capacity and funding to come. When foreign investment are allowed to come into any economy, they don't come with money alone. They come with capacity.
Right.
They come with due diligence, compliance, you know, because they follow their money and they ensure that that money does its work and they have an entry date, they have an exit date. But when we decide that we're not going to allow foreign investment, we're going to borrow our way to prosperity, we are mortgaging the future of our children. Right. So I think the president is doing the right thing, marketing Nigeria for global investment, as well as putting policies in place locally that's assisting the world to see, and even Nigerians, particularly Nigerians in the diaspora, because they are the ones that can demarket the country or evangelize the country. You know, any foreign investor coming to Nigeria will first speak to a Nigerian in diaspora. And if the diaspora is saying Nigeria is not what a place to be, it's not going to come.
They won't come here.
And I hear that very soon another bond that is focused on Nigerian diaspora is being launched by the federal government. So I must say, in my own estimation, that these policies are the right thing to do, and we can only pray that it works well.
Right. So that brings me to my next question, which was you ended with. You only pray it works well. Now, how do we ensure it works well? Because again, as Nigerians, we usually have the starting zeal to do something good, and at the end of the day, it's either that project is dumped by the way, or that project is not succeeded by other administrations. So how do we begin to ensure that this particular credit scheme is one that the drivers will do all within their capacity to ensure it succeeds?
Well, I think one of the first things that needs to be demanded of the government is adequate public enlightenment and engagement.
Okay.
These are monumental, game-changing policies, and I will expect that the government, managers of the government information system will arrange a countrywide public enlightenment strategy.
Okay.
Which is, engaging sitting with people, groups of students in different institutions, and breaking it down, and let them also have their own questions. Let them also give their own ideas. So there's a robust discussion across the country. Okay. Like a town hall meetings with traditional institutions, with parents, with students, with even lecturers. Because I heard some people calling in ASU to say the student loan scheme is not. They need to understand and get included. Get a sense of inclusion by listening to them. So in all of these policies, I think the management of the information system of government needs to be recalibrated, to make this a major, public awareness program and get the buy-in of Nigerians, even Nigerians abroad. And if we do that, what it then means is that, one, the government will have substantial support of the populace. Number two, they get a feedback mechanism to know where to adjust and make things happen as we go along the way. And public opinion is critical. Then the media, because when the media is also in bed, with a project, they can promote it, they can defend it. So I think that is the area that I think we need to hear more about the plan of government to democratize and publicize and engage Nigerians and the media for feedback on this, so everybody is on the same page. Okay. And that's it.
Okay, we know that the first phase will capture federal and state civil servants. And looking at the future now, how do we structure it in such a way that it's going to cater for every cadre of the society?
When I was going through the documents recently, I saw that there will be partnership with the central bank, the financial institutions, and the credit agencies. Now, the moment that is done, there is a huge population of Nigerians out of the civil service, both federal and state, who are in private sector, entrepreneurs as well, who are capable of sustaining a credit scheme because they're already borrowing and the banks are lending to them already. So through this collaboration, the government will be able to know those who can also, they probably will even be able to do more than the civil servants because they have more disposable income. So that is very important. So I reckon that the second phase will then be this category of people who are not in the federal civil service or state civil service, but are entrepreneurs, they work in world-class private institutions across the country, and they can actually strengthen this particular scheme in terms of the volume of transaction. And it's important they should be attended to very quickly because they have the capacity, more than the civil service, to deepen transaction within the system that will give effect, like I said, to increase in industrial capacity and output, which will engender more expansion for our industrial base and employment for our youth, and then even tax payable to government.
Right. So part of what Credit Corps also intends to do is to ensure that by 2030, 50% of working Nigerians are captured under this particular scheme. And if we've identified that the civil servants are just about 10%, and then hopefully by the second or the third phases of the initiative, more Nigerians will be captured. So by 2030, that 50% projection, is it workable?
It is workable. 2030 is next year. It's
just 6 years around the corner.
It's around the corner. And the way things move very fast in the country, this will become very popular. And like I said, the bigger 40% is in the private sector, as well as entrepreneurs. And they are the ones that actually have more capacity than civil servants to engage the credit system, to procure vehicles, to buy furniture, to buy properties with small deposits, and get support from the credit scheme.
So is it very intentional that the scheme intends to start with civil servants first as pilots, just to test how this will work?
I think that's important for government because that is what they control. And then once that is done, maybe a year or two from now, they will then move into the real 40%, with the support of the central bank and the credit scheme, credit agencies, and then access, that, because those ones are already lending and borrowing from the financial service industry already, and they can then be, brought into the picture. It is when they are brought in that the game really starts for our industrial revolution.
Okay, some of these economic policies of Mr. President and members of his team are matching it together with his campaign slogan, Renewed Hope. Does that give you the impression and the hope that better days await Nigerians?
Well, you know, I'm not in the cabinet of Mr. President, but I'm an admirer, and I believe in his capacity, to do what he says he would do, because of his many years of experience in the private sector, and at the very top, for that matter. And then when you look at what is done with Lagos State and the ability to have set a standard and a plan that is working, even though not at 100%, but is working. Unlike the other most of the other subnationals across the country. So I reckon that we have a man who will spend morning, day, and night thinking of ideas. And then secondly, he allows inputs. He surrounds himself with people that are intelligent, brilliant, both officially and unofficially, and is exposed. Exposure is critical to leadership. When you allow people that are exposed into leadership, things move very fast because they've experienced it, they've seen the world. They're not limited to by the environment. So I'm praying, and we almost pray for Mr. President that all of these ideas will germinate and lead to the firm foundation that Nigeria requires. Because there's a lot of negative news about Nigeria. But I tell people, this is a great country. The Goldman Sachs report 2-3 weeks ago that Nigeria is going to be the 5th largest economy in the world in 2075. That's a reality. 5th largest, bigger than most of the European economies. Because we don't even know, when we demarket Nigeria, we don't have the facts. We used to be an oil-producing country with gas. We are now a gas-producing country with oil. Corruption is there all over the world, has big, which be abated. The things that will abate is what we're doing. Inclusion, true student loan, credit scheme. All of these policies will reduce the proclivity to steal inordinately. And those that are stealing, we thank God for the new FCC, the determination to go after them and expose them. So the culmination of all of this is because we have someone who, is not a saint, but he loves the country, he has the capacity, he has the exposure.
Okay.
And I believe sincerely that they will all come together to move us to our destination.
All right. Before we allow you to go this morning, let's end on this fact. Again, can we begin to strengthen institutions more in Nigeria so that these institutions will outlive administrations? Because we have this thing about us, once one government leaves, another one comes, and then you want to scatter what another government has done and then to pave way for yours. But once we have initiatives such as this, how do we ensure that it is a Nigerian thing rather than an individual thing?
Okay, well, I'll answer that from two positions. One, I think that even for small organizations, the relevance, the ability of small organizations to become compliant, to put in place all of the structures for sustainability depends on their relationship with bigger and larger corporations. So as Nigeria is beginning to put in place all of the global standards that are common all over the world, you will see hand being held and support from international institutions to strengthen these policies. Because these are policies that have worked all over the world. They're not new. It's just that we've taken a long time to put them in place. So student loan is common across the world. Consumer credit is common across the world. So these are things that have been used for decades by international organizations as well as states across the world to strengthen the economy. So as we're doing that, we're going to be getting a lot of support, and we have things to lean on, best practices to copy to strengthen our own base.
Okay.
So and then secondly, the institutions of government. You had the Minister of Budget say exactly what I just said, that this is ultimately about industrial revolution and manufacturing. So there's well thought out, there's a philosophy behind policies. There must have been some debates, there must have inputs from international institutions, copying from other countries. So there's depth. That's what we're bringing out looks just about credit, but there's a multiplier effect, and that will benefit society. So there's depth of thought before policies are coming. And once these are in place, sustainability is guaranteed. Right. And I think the final thing is to get inclusion of the population and the media to buy into the project, to have their own say, and then create a mechanism where, there's
the feedback
mechanism that allows it. So where there are problems, it can be dealt with, and then ultimately we'll get to our destination.
Okay, our leaders now, they are playing their own role in ensuring that they create the right atmosphere for all of us to flourish. As Nigerians now, what are those major roles that we also need to play to make things easier for this crop of leaders?
I think leadership is a burden, so nobody helps them. Like the president will say, I asked for the job,
so don't
pity me, I will deal with it. So that's it, taking responsibility.
But we have some obligations as well, maybe payment of our taxes.
You see, our obligations are there. Payment of, don't forget that, there's always the debate about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Is it the responsibility of the people to the government or the other government to the people? I subscribe to the fact that when government begins to put policies like this out, social welfareist policies that shows compassion, that shows the interest of the people as the primary business of government, you will find a response from the populace to begin to do their own duties. They can see that indeed their own issues are the front burner of government.
Right.
And like I said the last time I was there, if you listen to debates of the British Parliament 24 hours a day, it's about the people. So now we see a government that is bringing students, solving student loan issues, education, impacting on industrial development and consumer credit, and policies that are people-focused. You begin to see a mind shift, and you see that the people themselves begin to embrace that government and knowing that this is a government that cares for us. And so, indeed, our responsibility will become much more, firmer, and more committed because we have a government that is focused on people issues.
All right, so it is a win-win situation as much as government is trying as much as it can to alleviate the sufferings of the people. The people must also trust and believe government and do their own part. Thank you again, Prince Dapo Adelegan, for finding time to be here with us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me again.